Hey guys, tonight we walk a silvered path through Roman Gaul where frost glitters on gravel and a single moonlit milestone leans like a tired soldier. The road beneath it runs arrow straight across fields and heaths and then without warning simply stops as if the Empire took a breath and forgot to exhale. If you try to march this ghost road in hobnailed sandals with no cloak, you probably won't survive the chill, though you'll look very authentic doing it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you are and what time it is. I love seeing the map of listeners light up. Now find yourself a cozy seat or a soft bed. Let your mind begin to unwind, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. They move in imagination along that midnight ribbon, past hedges shivering with sparrows, past haystacks hunched like sleeping oxen, and the road is everything Roman roads are supposed to be crowned. Centre, tidy drainage ditches, a raised agger until it loses its nerve at the lip of a marsh and dies among reeds. The silence that follows feels like a sentence missing a verb. Locals call it the road to nowhere and say it drinks footsteps. Children dare each other to touch the last paving stone and run back before the geese notice. Mainstream fact steadies the scene. Roman Gaul bristles with engineered highways, stone-layered viae that spring from Lugdunum Leon, under Agrippa's grand plan binding the Rhine, the Atlantic and the Mediterranean with a web of milestones and way stations. Surveyors use the Groma to chase straight lines across stubborn hills, and the cursus publicus thumps, along with dispatches mules and grumbling dignity. That tidy world makes the unfinished road feel like a smudge on polished marble. They pause by a toppled miliarium, its Latin chipped to cautious whispers. The emperor's name is there then half erased, as if some later hand feared to remember him too clearly, while the destination field is a riddle, 2 letters a space, a flourish that might be N for Noviomagus, or might be a bored mason's flourish. Historians still argue whether the stone was recut recycled, or simply botched by a contractor who mixed ambition with cheap wine. The number jumps from 12 to 15 with nothing in between, a clerical hiccup that invites ghosts to slip through the count. A cart track crosses where the road quits, and there the ground rises oddly as though an embankment began to lift the way for a bridge that never learned how to be one. Underfoot the gravel changes from proud metalling to a stingy spread of river pebbles, as if the treasury sighed and tightened belt and purse at the same time. Practical travellers avoid it the way sensible people avoid a door that never opens, but shepherds love the straightness for counting sheep, which is about as Roman a compromise as one can imagine. They picture the survey party arriving in spring, a centurion with ink on his fingers more than blood, a pair of muttering agrimensors balancing their groma like a shrine, mules jangling labourers stacking curbstones, a clerk fussing over the wax tablet because rain freckles the entry line. A joking legionary tells the new recruits that Rome builds roads to teach the earth manners, and the earth as always listens politely and does what it wants. If you've ever tried to assemble flat-pack furniture without the last 4 screws, you understand this stretch perfectly. One quirky tidbit clings to the roadside ditch like wild mint. A farmer swears his grandfather watered oxen from a sawn-off milestone hollowed like a trough. The carving, he says, made the water taste of empire and lizards, and neither ox nor man argued with either flavour during August. Another tale insists a hermit hammered coins into the last paving slab to bribe whatever spirit kept snuffing torches there at dusk. This did not fix the road, but it did make the slab difficult to lift without attracting attention. They walk farther gently and notice how the ghost road points straight at a dark ridge but refuses to climb. Instead, it stares at the hill like a chess player who suspects the board is cursed. The ditch on the right is trimmed the left, overgrown as if crews stopped mid-shovel the day an order arrived and never returned. Historians still argue whether an imperial recall a drained budget, a burst of rebellion, or a surveying error halted the work. The lovely thing about an unsent letter from the past is how generously it funds speculation. Night wind brings wood smoke and damp leaf autumn working its quiet craft, and they imagine wagons that never rattled here, inns that never bought their first amphora of wine, a mancio whose sign was painted and put away again. The unrealised future hums like a string plucked once. Mainstream certainty provides its soft anchor more than 80,000 kilometres of Roman roads, knit the empire milestones, naming emperors and distances with bureaucratic poetry. And yet incompletes happen canals. Silt aqueduct branches stub out, and sometimes a road walks bravely into marsh and decides to sit down. They picture a dispatch rider arriving with bad news, funds diverted to the Rhine forts or bridge timber, delayed by flood, or the fabulously Roman pleas proceed with moderation until clarity is achieved. The foreman nods, the way professionals nod when life proves that schedules are fiction, pays the men stacks tools in a wagon, and promises to return after harvest. The reeds grow by afternoon because reeds love council plans, and the road learns the art of ending gracefully without admitting defeat. A joke sneaks in like a fox at hen time. A muleteer tells travellers he can guide them to the end of the world for a small fee. Upon arrival, he points to the last stone, spreads his arms and says, "Behold nowhere," which earns him a reputation for philosophy and free soup. Another traveller swears the road is haunted by a centurion who keeps trying to measure it forever. If you feel a tap on your sandal and hear someone counting softly in Latin, you either need sleep or fewer figs. They crouch at the cut face where gravel meets peat, and there in patient layers the ground tells its quiet story. Pollen of alder and willow, a bead of burnt clay, a coin pressed by a boot heel, the tiniest curl of iron that might have been a nail. The road was young, the peat older, the empire impatient, the landscape unimpressed. Scholars lift fragments like librarians rescuing vowels, and every tiny find says the same thing. Someone intended a destination and intention. However noble is not the same thing as arrival. By lantern light, the milestones' erased letters glaze like fish scales. Someone once believed a name could anchor stone to purpose, and someone else believed names should be unpinned. So both beliefs coexist here as politely as neighbours who share a fence and a dislike for each other's music. They run a hand along the chisel grooves and feel how work hardens into history even when it fails. The Empire's confidence, so expert at straight lines, meets the Marsh's patience, so expert at swallowing them, and each bows slightly to the other. The moon climbs an unhurried coin, and the ghost road gleams as if freshly rolled. Owls pass without comment, which is their policy. Frost rhymes the ditch grass like tiny laurel crowns on blades that did not ask for honour. If the road ever had a nickname, it has been lost with the rest, so they borrow one via Nusquam, the way of nowhere, which is satisfyingly dramatic and also wrong in the kindest way, because it leads somewhere very particular, the exact place where certainty runs out and curiosity begins. They step back, letting the stillness be the loudest part of the story, and understand why the rumour catches people like burrs on wool. A road that stops is a riddle that starts, and Gaul is a good theatre for riddles forests to brood in rivers that carry gossip towns, that ring with the clink of cups and the scrape of styluses. The ghost road asks for no belief beyond attention. It gives in return the pleasant ache of wondering what letter should have followed the last two on the stone. So the journey opens here under a white breath of moon, and a milestone that cannot quite remember its promises. They will follow surveys and campfire tales, inscriptions and silences, clerks and comedians, soldiers and stonemasons, until the gravel teaches the lesson it has been quietly saving. Roads are arguments with landscape, and sometimes landscape wins with a smile. They call it the backbone of empire, the long grey ribbon of stone that ties villages to towns, towns to cities, and cities to the sea. The Roman road system is no joke, even if some parts of it now look more like stubborn scars across fields than functioning routes. Picture a line of legionaries marching in unison, sandals scuffing against gravel shields flashing in the sun. This is not just a stroll to the market. These are highways built with ambition, often straight as a thrown spear, cutting through hills and rivers with engineering confidence. The mainstream fact is clear: Rome constructed over 400,000 kilometres of roads, about 250,000 miles, with roughly 80,000 kilometres, 50,000 miles paved in stone. It is a record that still makes modern civil engineers both impressed and a little jealous. And yet among these well-planned arteries of empire there lies a peculiar outlier, a road that begins with grandeur, and then drifts off into nothing like a sentence abandoned mid-thought. Imagine walking along it today. The slabs are worn but not ruined, weeds poking through the seams, wild flowers softening what was once brutal efficiency. At first it feels familiar. The same squared stones you can find on the Appian Way outside Rome, the same meticulous drainage ditches lined with pebbles, the same sense of direction that whispers confidence. But then gradually the rhythm changes. The stones grow smaller, the path less defined. It pushes forward, but toward what fields? Hills, a scattering of oak and chestnut trees. No major settlement waits at the end, no villa, no fort, no crossroads. The road just stops. And in a culture obsessed with order, a road that stops is like a joke without a punchline. Roman engineers were not careless. This much is certain. These were the same people who carved tunnels through mountains and flung aqueducts across valleys. They measured distances with astounding accuracy using survey tools like the groma, a kind of cross-shaped staff that could line up perfect right angles, and the korobets, a level for aqueduct gradients. So why would they pour effort, labour and money into a stretch of road that trails off into nowhere? Historians still argue whether this was a failed project, a half-completed scheme, abandoned when politics shifted, or something stranger, a road not meant to reach but to symbolise. Let's not forget the quirky tidbits. A local Gallic legend insists the road once led to a city swallowed by the earth. In a single night, its inhabitants guilty of offending a god with arrogance. Another tale claims it was deliberately built to confuse invading armies, a grand stone decoy meant to lure enemies away from true Roman centres. It's hard not to smile at the thought of Roman generals sitting around a table saying, let's build an expensive trick road. It'll really mess with those Gauls. Absurd, yes, but sometimes absurdity hides a kernel of real strategy. The surrounding countryside offers clues and contradictions. On one side, vineyards slope gently their grapes fattening in the sun. On the other, a shallow marsh swells with reeds and frogs. Archaeologists digging near the road have found shards of pottery, some Roman, some Gallic, suggesting trade once brushed against this place. Yet no settlement large enough to justify a road of this size has ever been found. Villages, yes, but nothing monumental. A villa rustica here, a scattering of farms there, but no bustling town to explain the scale of the investment. Picture the labour. Teams of workers, slaves and locals conscripted into service, sweating as they haul stones into place. Soldiers supervising, perhaps a centurion barking orders to keep the line straight. The road would have been laid in layers first, a trench, then a foundation of stones, then gravel, then the heavy paving slabs tamped down to resist centuries of footsteps. This was the recipe for permanence, yet permanence without purpose becomes an enigma. Imagine being one of those workers scraping tar from your hands, wondering why you're building a road that leads only to open land. Do you whisper questions at night? Or do you keep your mouth shut, knowing Rome doesn't enjoy answering questions it didn't ask? And there is a practical mystery too. Roads usually link to something: a mine, a fortress, a coastal port, a shrine, even a remote farm that produced something Rome wanted. This one seems to have no such logic. Some argue it might have been intended for a quarry now lost to time, a place that supplied stone until it dried up. Others suggest it was a ceremonial road not for trade but for ritual, a route designed to reach an altar, a sacred grove, or a holy spring now erased by centuries of erosion. Historians still argue whether the lack of destination was intentional, a spiritual journey codified in stone, or whether we are just missing the endpoint buried under fields or modern villages. The image of locals using the road long after Rome abandoned it is vivid. Farmers guiding oxen carts down the smoothest surviving stretch. Children skipping along the worn stones, inventing games around grooves left by ancient wheels. Shepherds driving flocks across it, the sheep pausing to nibble tufts of grass sprouting in cracks. For them, the mystery mattered less than utility. A road, after all, is still a road, even if it ends in weeds. And yet the mystery whispers louder, the more one looks. Why here? Why this line? Why no ending roads, like stories are supposed to arrive somewhere? This one trails into silence. Maybe it is a reminder that Rome, for all its triumphs and monuments, also produced riddles. Not everything they built was part of a master plan. Some projects faltered, some faded, some defied explanation. The Ghost Road of Gaul is one such puzzle, leaving behind not ruins of a city, but ruins of a question. As dusk falls, picture walking that road yourself. The stones warm from the sun begin to cool under bare feet. Cicadas drone. A breeze lifts dust into a thin veil of gold. The path stretches ahead, and then dissolves into grass as if the land itself swallows the ambition of empire. You look back, and for a moment you can almost hear the tramp of sandals, the clatter of wagons, the orders shouted in Latin. But when you face forward again, there is only emptiness. The road leads nowhere, and in that nowhere lies a mystery Rome never explained. They wake to frost on heather and the soft hiss of a north wind combing the grasses and the road. If it really deserves that proud Roman word, yet unfurls in a pale line across the fields, like a chalk mark the sky forgot to erase. Survey pegs sprout at regular intervals, cords snap taut and the foremen murmur numbers while soldiers tramp up with shovels that glint like tiny suns in the morning. They measure, they mark, They breathe in that damp, loamy scent that only half-frozen soil gives off, and they begin the work that always turns lines into destinies. Cut the turf crown, the agger lay the foundations. Mainstream fact steadies their rhythm. Roman roads prefer layers statumen of fist-sized stones at the bottom, rudus of crushed rock nucleus packed like a firm mattress, and a top coat of fitted slabs, the summa crusta, that will gleam after rain like oiled marble. They know the recipe the way bakers know bread. They also know the Latin names for the future way stations, mansions, for sleep mutations, for fresh mounts, because the cursus publicus cannot gallop without regular hay and hot stew. The ghost road through Gaul seems to accept these customs for a while. It lets the crew build straight and proud, and then sly as river fog it starts to act strange. It acts strange first in the soil. Where the map promises gravel, they find spongy peat. Where the plan calls for 1 cart of stone, the earth swallows 3 as if some hungry god is snacking beneath their feet. They bring wicker hurdles to float the agger. They hammer oak piles into the muck until the hammerman's hands ring, and still the base sinks a finger's breadth overnight like a tired mattress remembering a heavy sleeper. A centurion jokes that the road is practicing its breathing expand, contract, expand, and the men laugh, because lighting a brazier of jokes keeps the cold off better than damp cloaks ever do. Yet their laughter has that thin edge, the same thinness you hear when a traveller swears he is not lost, while studying the same milestone for the 3rd time. Then comes the first milestone, the millenarium hauled upright by a dozen shoulders and half as many swear words, its face left blank for the stonemason to chisel in the dedicatory line. Later the emperor's name, the distance from the provincial capital, the official stamp of certainty. The crew sets it plumb and true, and all afternoon the sun leans on it like a lazy cat. At sunset the steward counts rations, the scribe dots his wax, the mule bell tings, and the milestone is as ordinary as a loaf of coarse bread. By dawn it has turned not toppled, just rotated as if the earth under it shrugged. Nobody saw it move, but the paint line the mason sketched yesterday sits now 2 fingers east. Bad bedding, the engineer mutters, trying not to sound like a man who sleeps with one eye open. A quirky tidbit creeps through camp anyway. Someone swears a Gaulish grandmother left garlic at the base in the night a charm so that carters won't break axles here. Another man claims he heard humming from the stone as if a bee got trapped in limestone eons ago and only now remembers its song. They push onward because that is what Romans do even when the mud says otherwise. Where the ghost road meets a shallow stream, they throw down a proper causeway, brushwood mats, then basketed stones, then a firm cap that clicks under hobnails the way a good floor should. Where a hill rises, they slice the shoulder, clean a neat terrace that shows off their geometry to any wandering sheep with an eye for symmetry. Where the line encounters a stand of sacred oaks, they detour by a hair's breadth, rather than tempt the local gods, and a priest in russet wool mumbles that small respect costs less than big reparations. The work hums, oaths, hum even hope hums. And yet the strangest thing about the ghost road is not failure. It is meticulousness without destination. The line keeps going through pasture and scrub, crosses a Romanised farmstead that could have sold bread and wine to couriers, skims a shoulder of upland heath, and then refuses every sensible junction like a stubborn mule. It should bend toward a river port. It does not. It should court an existing town. It glides past with the cool politeness of a senator avoiding an awkward acquaintance. Historians still argue whether this obstinate alignment announces a plan we no longer see. An abandoned colonia, a fortress never finished a quarry that ran dry, or whether the crew itself becomes the plan building because funding flows this quarter, and stopping when politics shifts like weather. In the archives later, Hans will tap at a fragmentary itinerary and mutter that the ghost road looks more like a cadastral boundary. Yes, a property grid masquerading as infrastructure than a living artery. Others squint at LiDAR maps and swear they find the shadow of a destination under modern hedges like a secret written in a palimpsest. The debate is gentle, as most good arguments are at dusk. The evidence glows, then dims, then glows again when a new footnote lights it from a different angle. The crew lives by smaller certainties. They set a mutatio, just a post-station shed, and a corral every 8 to 10 Roman miles because worn hooves and sweaty couriers are as predictable as taxes. They dig ditches to drain the agger and plant willow where the ditch wants to slouch because trees with quick feet drink like champions. They spread gravel with wooden rakes and the sound is cosy like dry rain. At night they huddle in leather tents, steaming stew of lentils and something optimistically called pork, and tell each other that the line will meet a town soon, that their pay will arrive, that the tent pegs will hold if the wind keeps its manners. A light joke wanders the fires when this road finally reaches the god's house. The doorkeeper will demand toll in pine cones, because coin is useless where time goes sideways. Mainstream fact keeps the tone credible. Gaul bristles with roads by the High Empire Lugdunum to Arelati Narbo to Tolosa. All those proud names braided by stone and logistics sing best in straight lines. Surveyors favour the Groma sighting, right angles with crossed strings, while engineers borrow every trick from marsh causeways in Britannia to mountain terraces in the Alps. The Ghost Road clearly shares that curriculum. Its metrology is textbook. What it lacks is an ending we can point to on a postcard. Even so, the men treat it like a road because the body believes what the body repeats. Step lift set. Pick, toss, tamp. Measure, mutter, move on. They encounter locals who watch with folded arms and a humour older than Latin. A woman in a teal shawl sells cheese to the work gang and asks where the road goes. When the foreman shrugs, she laughs softly, the way one laughs at rain that falls only on the neighbour's field. A boy brings a woven basket of apples and wants a nail as payment because iron shines brighter than coin in his pockets. He pockets 2 nails and a story, promising to tell it to calves that have never left their meadow. A druidic remnant dignified grave stands well back and traces a circle in dust with a hazel switch. He says nothing, but the circle does not look like approval. The engineer thanks him anyhow because courtesy travels faster than a cohort. As weeks fold into months, the Ghost Road performs its neatest trick. It becomes a habit. Workers wake to it, joke inside it, dream along it. Messengers glance for it as if it should already be on every map, and muleteers prefer its firmness even when it dead ends against a thicket of alder that was not invited to the planning meeting. A man can grow fond of a path that disobeys him. Stubbornness recognises stubbornness. By first snowfrost ferns etch the surface stones so finely they look woven. The miliaria wear wreaths of rhyme and pretend to be laurelled heroes. Somewhere a clerk far from this cold will write a phrase that tries to sound neutral, project suspended pending imperial reply, and the men here will simply pack tools, stamp feet, and ask where the next line begins. They leave behind a string of beginnings, a flawless camber across a marsh that barely deserves the verb cross, a bridge abutment that meets a river with the energy of a handshake, never returned a fork that points to a valley, no road, ever courts. Future shepherds will steer flocks onto the hard crown because hooves love certainty. Future kings will lift a stone and say, look how the old people measured their world, and then lay a charter on top. Future children will balance along the ditch edge arms out trying not to fall into a nettled summer. The Ghost Road does not mind being useful to strangers, it minds only being explained. Some nights the wind drops and sound carries. You can hear the small things again, the ping of cooling iron, the last scrape of a shovel blade, the rill of thaw water whispering down the ditch towards somewhere it understands. In that hush, the foreman who has learned to keep jokes ready like spare tent pegs admits to himself that he has grown oddly fond of a road that refuses to confess what it is for. He rubs his thumb across the smooth head of a survey nail and pockets it, a keepsake the way some men keep St. Bones. He suspects he will use it later as a charm against stubborn projects, or at least as a shiny thing to focus on while a senator explains the budget. And as the campfire slumps into coals, the road rests straight, exact faintly gleaming under starlight, pointing at a darkness that either hides a destination or refuses to need one. The men sleep. The milestone does not rotate tonight. The frost returns to the heather, and the Ghost Road breathes the lightest breath, the kind you only notice when you sit very still and let your mind grow quiet enough to hear stone think. The Roman road through Gaul is not just stone and dust beneath sandals. It is also memory carried forward by whispers, and those whispers become louder once the empire spreads its legions deep into the provinces. Picture the soldiers trudging westward from Lugdunum, today's lion heavy packs cutting into shoulders, their bronze fittings glinting as though the sun were trying to cheer them on. They expect order, discipline, a road that leads to some fortress or depot, but the path that drifts into mist feels like it cannot make up its mind. The stones are smooth in one stretch, then break into gravel, then turn into a faint ribbon of clay. A mule might refuse to continue. Even Roman mules, famous for their stubborn patience, know when a road is behaving oddly. Still, the legionaries continue because Rome demands obedience, even when the very earth seems uncertain. Mainstream fact steadies the picture here. The Roman road system in Gaul was one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects of antiquity, with thousands of miles of carefully surveyed routes connecting settlements, forts and trading hubs. These roads were not built casually. They were designed to project authority, speed up troop movements, and knit the provinces into Rome's fabric. Yet every great system has its loose threads. In this case, historians still argue whether certain fragments of road that vanish into forest or marsh were abandoned projects, military diversions, or mistakes that Rome never admitted. Even the mighty empire was not immune to the occasional architectural shrug. The locals treat the road with suspicion. Peasants whisper that it leads nowhere on purpose, a trick of engineers who wish to lure invaders into endless woods. Others claim it was cursed from the start, laid down upon sacred Celtic ground. The Druids, though diminished by Roman conquest, linger in memory as guardians of strange places. A quirky tidbit records that in one rural village, mothers used to warn children not to follow the phantom road lest they walk forever in circles and return older than when they left. As bedtime warnings go, it beats brush your teeth. The soldiers report back oddities. Some say that when they marched by moonlight, the road gleamed faintly as if polished by hands unseen. Others swear the stones hummed under their sandals, vibrating like the plucked string of a lyre. A centurion dismisses this as wine-addled exaggeration, but then he avoids taking that route at night himself. Rome might scoff at superstition in the Senate chamber, but along Gaul's edge, pragmatism often wins over ridicule. Merchants too find reasons to grumble. Wagons laden with amphorae creak along the phantom stretch, only to lose wheels in sudden ruts or to discover the road fading into bogland. One sardonic traveller notes in his diary that the only thing the road reliably leads to is repair bills, and yet he uses it again because cutting across wild Gaul without a road is worse. This is the Roman compromise in miniature endure irritation for the promise of structure. The more stories circulate, the stranger they become. A farmer insists he saw a column of mist standing upright on the phantom stretch, refusing to move as if guarding the stones. A shepherd swears his flock wandered onto the road and then scattered, bleating as though pursued by invisible dogs. A tavern keeper in autumn, tired of listening to such tales, jokes that the road was simply built by contractors who were paid by the mile, not by the destination. That joke earns him free drinks from legionaries who nod grimly as if bureaucracy were a phantom curse more dangerous than druids. Historians still debate whether this section of road was ever finished. Some maps suggest it was intended to connect river crossings along the Loire, but others show it veering into marshland where no settlement existed. Archaeologists find fragments of paving that suddenly stop like a story without an ending. Was it war that interrupted the work, a rebellion in the region that shifted priorities, or was it simply bad surveying, a rare but not impossible blunder in an empire that prided itself on straight lines? These arguments have no firm resolution, which is why the ghost road retains its allure. And then there are the travellers who swear. The road sometimes leads to places that do not exist. A merchant claims he followed it to a clearing filled with Roman columns, though none had ever been built there. By the next morning the clearing had dissolved into forest. A centurion records in his log that the road once brought him to a river bend that he could never find again on later marches. Skeptics roll their eyes, yet the accounts multiply, and each retelling adds another layer of mist to the tale. The irony is that the road works best when it does not work at all. Its mystery draws people in, makes them talk, ensures it is never forgotten. A perfectly ordinary road would vanish from memory as most of Rome's thousands of miles of stone already have. But a road that leads to nowhere, that hums, that glows, that breeds jokes and warnings and philosophical musings, that road outlives its practical purpose. One dry Roman wit is said to have quipped that the ghost road's greatest achievement was making Gaul sound interesting. He may have been mocking provincial dullness, but he also captured the strange durability of mystery in a world obsessed with order. Even today, scholars trace satellite images and walk half-buried paths through French fields, trying to decide where the road once ran. Was it meant to connect with a port on the Atlantic? Was it simply a fragment, an aborted start of a bigger project that shifted elsewhere? The answers hide beneath centuries of soil, and the debate is unlikely to end soon. The ghost road, like the phantom island before it, thrives not on certainty but on the lack of it. And as the story of Rome proves again and again, absence can be more powerful than presence when it comes to memory. The ghost road keeps stretching westward, and those who travel its stones carry stories as much as supplies. By the time the 2nd century rolls around, the road has become a rumour in its own right. Not everyone has walked it, of course, but everyone seems to know someone who swears they did. In Rome itself, senators recline in shaded courtyards and tell dinner guests about the strange path in Gaul that leads into mist and comes out of nothing. They say it is an example of Roman excess proof that the empire builds more roads than it can use. Others chuckle and call it a monument to Roman stubbornness, like that uncle who insists his shortcut through the woods will get you home faster even though it has never once done so. And just like that uncle, the road seems destined to confound both mapmakers and poets. Merchants latch onto the tale like barnacles to a hull. At busy markets from Massalia to Lugdunum, an olive seller might lean forward, lower his voice and tell a curious buyer that his wares came straight from groves near the mysterious road's end. The buyer, of course, knows this is nonsense. Olives do not grow in mist, but the story adds a little extra flavour as if the fruit were seasoned with adventure itself. Quirky as it sounds, one satirist writes of amphora, filled with seawater labelled wine, from the Ghost Road's vineyards, a jab at both greedy traders and gullible buyers. The audience roars with laughter, but beneath the laughter, there is recognition. When something cannot be proven, someone will still try to sell it. Mystery has always been good business. The road also trickles into tavern smoky places where sailors and mule drivers mingle. One man swears he followed the path until he heard the sound of dogs barking far out to sea. Another insists he smelled pine resin, though no forest stood nearby. The crowd laughs, but they also lean closer because a good story pairs as well with watered wine as it does with roasted goat. Here is where the Ghost Road becomes more than a curiosity. It becomes entertainment. Patrons slap tables, invent jokes, and even compose drinking songs that rhyme poorly with nowhere. The point is not accuracy, but atmosphere, and the road obliges by refusing to give up any certainty. Patrician villas are not immune either. Wealthy hosts often commission maps to hang in their halls, maps that display the empire's vast expanse in neat inked lines. And somewhere in the far west there it is a faint curve, a dotted suggestion, a note in the margins said to exist. Guests recline on couches, sip watered wine and trace the curve with their fingers, asking whether their host believes in it. The host only smiles because mystery is more fun than certainty. A map without blank edges is like a joke without a punchline. The cartographers themselves suffer the most. Imagine a tired copyist in a dim scriptorium candlelight flickering across wax tablets and parchment. He reaches the edge of the known world, the place where Iberia meets the sea, and his pen hesitates. Does he leave the page, blank confessing ignorance? Does he boldly draw a coastline no one has confirmed? Or does he hedge with dotted ink, leaving the decision to future generations? More often than not, he chooses the hedge. And so the Ghost Road persists, carried forward not by discovery but by hesitation. Historians still argue whether this persistence came from pride superstition or simple clerical laziness. Perhaps it was all three. Mainstream fact steadies this swirl of rumour. The Romans, like the Greeks before them, adored grand maps. Agrippa's Orbis Terrarum once glimmered in marble, showing Rome at the centre of the world. Itineraries were scratched on wax, and the long ribbon-like Putinger map would later stretch geography into something resembling a scroll. Yet every one of these maps frays at the edges. Sea monsters lurk in the margins, fog banks turn into promontories, and captions like "Hic sunt dracones" remind viewers that knowledge has limits. It is precisely at these edges that the Phantom Road thrives, nestled between data and desire, part fact and part mirage. Not even rituals escape its pull. A nervous clerk invents a charm for captains about to depart westward, toss a slice of bread into the water. If it drifts outward, the road welcomes them. If gulls snatch it, the gods prefer them home for dinner. Everyone chuckles at the absurdity, but Rome is a city that happily reads omens from bird flight goat entrails, or even a senator's sneeze. Why not bread for the waves? It costs nothing, and gives courage, which is sometimes more valuable than grain. Jokes sprout alongside belief. One tavern sign promises wine from the Phantom Road's vineyards, pay today, drink when it appears. Another jest insists the road's governor is a fog bank with lifetime tenure. A more cutting quip claims its main export is excuses because any failed voyage can be blamed on storms near the Ghost Road. Laughter echoes, but beneath it lies something heavier, the uncomfortable truth that Rome, for all its power, cannot conquer mystery. Politicians find their own use, and orators gesture toward the Phantom Isle at the road's end as proof of ambition. We seek the island as we seek prosperity. Defeated admirals excuse their failures by claiming weather manifestly divine, a bureaucratic phrase that sounds impressive while admitting nothing. The Ghost Road thus becomes a rhetorical shield protecting pride from exposure. Yet in its stubborn refusal to end anywhere real, it also humbles Rome, reminding even the proudest consul that not everything can be paved, taxed, or conquered. And then there are the quiet private maps people carry. Sailors stand a little longer at railings staring west. Generals pause at dusk, their plans momentarily loosened by the glow of horizon. Librarians copy scrolls twice, fearful that absence spreads like fire. Parents hush children with promises that the ghost road ends in safety, or with warnings that some journeys are meant never to be finished. In this way, the road drifts from stone into psyche-reshaping behaviour, more than any physical path ever could. The scholars of today continue the debate. Did the road once lead to a volcanic island west of the Canaries? Did sailors mistake fog and pumice for cliffs and forests? Or did longing itself draw the line, a mirage etched in ink and memory? The arguments blur like tide against shore, never conclusive, always compelling. And perhaps that ambiguity is the point. The road survives precisely because it refuses to resolve. It asks for no maintenance, only a flick of ink in a margin, and in return it keeps imaginations restless. By twilight, Rome itself grows quiet. Sandals click on stone streets, lamps glow faintly in courtyards, and someone still glances west, wondering if the road truly leads to a forgotten shore. The empire can build aqueducts, raise legions, and pave 1,000 kilometers of highway, but it cannot stop its people from chasing shadows. The ghost road lingers not because it is real, but because it is useful a reminder that the unknown is always closer than we admit. The ghost road is not content to remain in the dirt. It insists on drifting into speech, into ink, into the slippery space where rumour takes on the weight of fact. By the 2nd century, when Roman Gaul is studded with garrisons and market towns, the unfinished track has become something of a parlour trick for storytellers. They sit at long tables in smoky taverns, gulping watered wine, and declare that the road leads to nowhere. The phrase is repeated so often, it becomes a kind of shorthand for futility. Children learn it in jest, soldiers mutter it after losing dice, and merchants apply it to business rivals who promise profits that never arrive. A ghost road, after all, makes an excellent punchline, and yet beneath the laughter, unease lingers. Roads are not supposed to fade into nothingness. Roman surveyors, those famously practical engineers, usually lay out each mile with the precision of accountants balancing columns. To imagine them abandoning a stretch of pavement is to imagine the gods themselves throwing down their chalk and rulers. A mainstream historical fact steadies the mind. Here Roman surveyors did indeed use the groma, a cross-shaped instrument, that allowed them to measure straight lines with uncanny accuracy even over hills. That knowledge, preserved in Vitruvius's writings, explains why Roman roads usually run arrow straight for mile after mile. The idea that one of these lines simply dwindled into scrubland is by itself a violation of Roman identity. Some say the road was cursed. One fringe tidbit recorded in a marginal note of a Gallic chronicle suggests that workers muttered of strange lights appearing in the forest nearby, flickering like lanterns, though no hand carried them. The rumour grew into a belief that the construction crew laid down their stones until the lights danced across their work one night, and the next morning they refused to return. A century later the tale was retold with variations. Sometimes the lights were ghosts, sometimes the glare of angry gods, sometimes the flames of druids haunting their stolen land. The details change, but the unease is consistent. Something stopped the Romans, something stronger than stone. Scholars of course try to wrangle sense from nonsense. Historians still argue whether the abandonment was economic rather than mystical. Perhaps the route was intended to connect a minor settlement that never thrived, or perhaps the terrain revealed itself too unstable for heavy wagons. If you suggest the planners discovered marshland hidden under deceptive grass, a landscape that could swallow foundations faster than masons could lay them. The argument remains unresolved, but even the driest explanations cannot fully smother the romance of a road that promises destination and delivers only emptiness. Meanwhile, the ghost road creeps into Roman literature not with the solemnity of tragedy, but with the sly wink of satire. A poet of the Silver Age slips in a line mocking a general who marched as far as the road that leads nowhere. The audience chuckles, recognizing the jab as both literal and metaphorical. And isn't that the trick of this story? The road, like so many rumours, works because it serves double duty. It is a physical mystery and also a cultural metaphor, a joke and a warning. In patrician villas, guests recline on couches, the servants refill cups, and someone inevitably gestures to a map. The host taps a faint dotted line running westward and murmurs, "Ah, yes, the road that fades." The company laughs, but a small hush follows the way people pause after an omen is spoken aloud, because no one likes to dwell on the idea that even Rome, the city that paved the world, might stumble. The hush passes and conversation flows again, but the silence leaves a fingerprint. A charming anecdote slips into the oral tradition. One senator known for betting on absurdities is said to have wagered a small fortune that the road would be completed within his lifetime. His heirs decades later tried to collect, insisting that the road was indeed finished because it had ended in nothingness. The Senate clerk recording the case according to legend scrawled in the margin, "An end is not the same as a destination." Whether true or invented, the tale has the ring of Roman wit, dry bureaucratic and slightly cruel. Meanwhile, travellers who come across the site add their own gloss. One soldier records in a letter home that the place feels unfinished, like a half-written verse. Another merchant tells his family that he followed the track for several kilometres, only to see it dissolve into scrub and hear the wind whistle strangely, as if the stones were hollow. He probably meant nothing more than the eerie whistle of air across cracked pavement, but by the time the letter was read aloud in a market, the whistle had become a voice. Retelling has a way of magnifying unease like light shining through a crack, and growing wider each time someone peeks. By now the road is more than a route. It is a stage for collective imagination. Jokes multiply. Someone quips that the road was built for tax collectors chasing citizens who vanished conveniently into the wilderness. Another insists it is a divine prank, the gods demonstrating that even Rome cannot chart every inch of earth. These quips make their way into graffiti scrawled on tavern walls. The road goes nowhere, but so does my husband, reads one scratched line, part humour, part complaint, entirely human. Still beneath the jokes, the deeper fascination remains. Roads symbolise order conquest and Rome's promise of permanence. To admit that one road goes nowhere is to admit that permanence is fragile. And so, the ghost road survives precisely because it unsettles. It is repeated not despite its emptiness, but because emptiness is impossible to ignore. The road becomes a metaphor wielded by politicians. An orator mocks his rivals' policies by declaring they march boldly along the road that leads to nothing. The crowd laughs, then murmurs because the metaphor feels too sharp, too close. Bureaucrats use the phrase in reports. Philosophers borrow it for lectures on futility. Every retelling sands away the physical mystery until the road becomes a symbol, a catchphrase, a ghost not of stone but of speech. And perhaps that is its most enduring trick. By vanishing in stone it found immortality in words. The Romans, masters of rhetoric, were quick to turn absence into metaphor, and the ghost road offered itself up like a stage. To this day one can almost imagine the stones sighing with relief. Better to vanish as mystery than to crumble into dust unnoticed. The ghost road does not vanish from Roman thought when armies retreat, or when governors pack up their tablets. Instead, it lingers in the same way a half-remembered song does, haunting market chatter, temple rituals, and even the casual graffiti scratched onto plaster walls. By the 3rd century, every traveller in Gaul seems to know a version of the tale, though none can agree on its ending. Some say the road disappears into marshes near the Loire, others swear it runs straight as a spear toward the Atlantic, and a few imaginative souls mutter that it tunnels under the earth like a mole, and resurfaces hundreds of miles away. Whatever the case, the phantom road remains both a path and a puzzle, as familiar to rumour as the Colosseum is to spectacle. Merchants are particularly fond of the story. After all, commerce thrives on mystery almost as much as on olives and wine. A trader in Narbo can lean across his stall of dyed cloth and whisper that his goods come from the end of the road. Never mind that the bolts are clearly imported from Alexandria, the words are good salesmanship. Customers dazzled by the suggestion of exotic origins hand over coins more easily. It is a quirk of markets everywhere. Attach a story and you raise the price. The ghost road becomes less a logistical failure and more a marketing strategy, though admittedly not one you could present to the Roman treasury with a straight face. Yet beneath the jokes, fear persists. Soldiers stationed along the frontier sometimes march patrols near the broken paving stones, and they report an uncanny silence. Birds do not sing, hares do not dart from the hedges, and the air itself feels thick as if woven with invisible threads. One centurion writes that he ordered his men to sing marching songs loudly, not to keep step, but to keep dread at bay. Historians still argue whether these reports reflect genuine atmospheric oddities, perhaps fog rising from nearby wetlands, or whether they reveal the way human nerves can turn a landscape into an adversary. Either explanation fits, and neither is entirely comforting. The mainstream fact steadying the tale is that Roman Gaul did host an extensive road network built with the usual Roman recipe of stone layers, gravel and paving blocks. Archaeologists have uncovered stretches that are marvels of engineering straight lines, cutting across hillsides like deliberate scars. Yet not every project reached completion. Funding ran out, bridges collapsed, and political rivalries sometimes left segments stranded in the middle of nowhere. The Ghost Road may have been nothing more than an abandoned construction site. Still, the human imagination rarely accepts mundane failure when supernatural intrigue is available. In taverns, the legend becomes more theatrical. Patrons joke that the road is Rome's laziest legionnaire, always marching but never arriving. Others raise cups of sour wine and claim the paving stones were laid by giants who grew bored halfway through. A particularly witty scribe even scratches a cartoon on a tavern wall, a donkey pulling a cart off a cliff labelled Via Spectra, the road of ghosts. Laughter fills the smoky room, but beneath the humour lingers unease. If the Empire cannot control its roads, the very veins through which power flows, what else might slip beyond control? Rome's infrastructure is supposed to be eternal, as solid as its aqueducts, and as dependable as its milestones. The Ghost Road whispers otherwise. A quirky anecdote drifts from a late source in Massalia, claiming that a senator lost an entire fortune investing in a caravan venture meant to follow the road west. When the wagons returned empty, he blamed trickery by local druids. His rivals in the Senate mocked him mercilessly, calling him the prefect of nowhere. The insult stuck for years, resurfacing whenever he attempted to speak in debates. It is the sort of story that, true or not, reveals how quickly rumour could be weaponized in Roman politics. To be associated with a road to nowhere was to be marked as foolish, gullible, or both. Meanwhile, ordinary villagers continued to weave the Ghost Road into their own folklore. In one rural district, children were warned not to stray too far at dusk lest the road carry them into shadows where they would vanish forever. In another, shepherds told tales of phantom processions marching along the stones at midnight, silent legions with hollow eyes, eternally searching for an end that did not exist. Such stories blur the line between campfire entertainment and genuine cautionary tale. They also ensure that the road remains alive in memory long after its physical stones crumble into dust. Religious interpretations grow alongside the folklore. Some priests of Mercury, god of travellers, claim that the road was laid as an offering to him, but was left unfinished because mortals cannot hope to match divine pathways. Sacrifices of bread and honey are left at its edge, small gestures of respect. Others warn that the road leads to the realm of the dead, comparing it to the mythical road souls travel after leaving the body. These rituals may be minor compared to Rome's grand temples, but they demonstrate how adaptable the story is. Infrastructure failure transforms into cosmic lesson with a sprinkle of incense. One cannot ignore the philosophers who adore using the road as metaphor. A Stoic writer quips that human desire is like that road, always building, never satisfied, always stopping short of true completion. A cynic counters that the road proves the futility of empire itself, because even the mightiest cannot pave their way past uncertainty. These remarks may sound like the mutterings of men who enjoy their own cleverness too much, yet they preserve the Ghost Road in a different register. What began as gravel and stone mutates into moral teaching. By late antiquity, the road acquires a darker edge. With Roman authority weakening in Gaul, local warlords begin using the legend as psychological warfare. One chieftain is said to have spread rumours that his enemies disappeared when they marched along the stones, swallowed by the land itself. Whether his rivals believed him or not, they avoided the road. In this way, rumour becomes strategy, and the Ghost Road achieves a kind of power more lasting than brickwork. Still, across centuries, the essential question remains: what was the road originally meant to achieve? Was it intended to link a fort with a port that never materialised? Was it designed to impress locals with Roman engineering bravado, only to be abandoned when funds dried up? Or was it indeed a simple cart path magnified into myth by centuries of exaggeration? Historians still argue whether any physical remnants match the descriptions in later texts. Some excavations claim faint alignments of stones, others dismiss them as natural ridges. The debate continues, a mirror of the road itself, always leading forward, never arriving. And so, in the Roman imagination, the Ghost Road becomes more than stone. It is a parable of ambition, a symbol of uncertainty, and a reminder that even the empire of aqueducts and amphitheatres sometimes leaves behind loose threads. Travellers pause where the stones fade into earth, squint at the horizon, and wonder whether the road waits just out of sight, daring them to step onto it. Like so many mysteries, it endures not because it is solved, but because it refuses solution. In that refusal lies its power and its ability to keep generations leaning forward, listening and dreaming of where the path might lead. The Ghost Road does not rest quietly in ruins. It lives on in the tongues of ordinary people, winding itself into jokes, rituals, and daily excuses. By the time late Roman Gaul has become a patchwork of garrisons, villas and villages, nearly everyone has a story to contribute. Some are silly, some profound, some whispered like warnings, but all share one quality: the road is never forgotten. Like a stubborn melody, it finds new verses with every generation. In the bustling markets of Lugdunum, modern Leon, the phantom road becomes a salesman's secret ingredient. A merchant selling amphorae of wine might lean across his stall, lower his voice, and insist that his stock was shipped from beyond the end of the road. Never mind that the jars still reek faintly of Italian vineyards. The implication of exotic, unreachable origins gives them allure. Shoppers chuckle, but they also pay. Quirky exaggerations like this reveal how myths can grease the wheels of commerce. Mystery, after all, sells just as well as olives and lamp oil. It's the Roman version of slapping limited edition on a product label. Taverns take the tale further, transforming it into full-fledged theatre. Sailors returning from stormy voyages swear they saw torches flickering along the phantom road's edges as though invisible processions were walking by night. A carpenter stands on a table waving his hands and imitating ghostly legionnaires who march forever but never reach their camp. Patrons roar with laughter, cups slosh, and someone shouts that Rome ought to charge tolls to the dead if they keep using imperial infrastructure. It is a joke, with Bite reminding listeners that Rome taxes everything else, so why not a ghost road? Even cynicism sounds better when lubricated with wine. Yet beneath the laughter there lingers a hush, a nervous awareness that the road carries more than entertainment. One farmer claims he heard strange barking dogs when passing by at dusk, though no village lay nearby. Another swears the paving stones glowed faintly under moonlight, as if dew carried its own lanterns. Historians still argue whether these reports are echoes of genuine natural phenomena, perhaps reflections of phosphorescent moss, or the cry of distant wolves, or whether they are nothing more than the human mind stitching strangeness onto shadow. Either way, they thicken the atmosphere, until the ghost road feels less like rubble and more like a presence. Mainstream fact grounds the swirl of rumour. Roman cartography and surveying were highly advanced. Engineers regularly plotted roads with remarkable precision, sometimes aligning them so perfectly that their straightness still startles modern hikers. The persistence of a road that seemingly led nowhere is therefore striking. Romans prized utility, and roads were investments in taxation, trade and military control. An incomplete or nonsensical route feels almost un-Roman, which is perhaps why it bred such fascination. It is the contrast, the empire's reputation for order, colliding with a path that defies reason, that made the story endure. At times the road becomes scapegoat. When a shipment of grain spoils, a merchant shrugs and blames delays near the phantom road. When a soldier deserts, rumours circulate that he was lured away by visions of an island or a paradise at the road's end. A chronicler dry as dust even records that the road's greatest export was excuses. It is a cruel but clever remark, and the kind of witticism Romans love to repeat. That one line guarantees the story survives another century, because ridicule is just as powerful a preservative as reverence. Households adopt the myth in subtler ways. In a villa near Massalia, a mosaicist inserts a pale, faint line of stone running off the edge of a seascape design, an inside joke for the owner, a whisper of the phantom road embedded in art. Children learn lullabies that soothe them with promises the road stays far away, meaning no monsters will come tonight. Parents smile, but their eyes betray unease. The idea of an unfinished wandering path feels a little too much like life itself. The road becomes metaphor domestic as well as public, a background rhythm against which human dramas play. Religion predictably borrows it. Priests at small coastal shrines toss offerings onto the stones, murmuring that if the gods do indeed raise lands and sink them, then travellers had better stay on their good side. Bread honey and even small carved dolphins accumulate tokens of both faith and fear. A mother brings her child to the site, promising him that brave boys see the road stretch farther than cowards do. It is a charming lie, perhaps, but one that stiffens young spines and keeps old rituals alive. Rome thrives on such gestures, weaving belief into stone as readily as mortar. Philosophers too cannot resist. A Stoic lecturer compares the road to human desire, always striving, never arriving, its unfinished stones, a parable of restless ambition. A cynic counters that it demonstrates the futility of empire itself, proof that even Rome cannot pave over uncertainty. Audiences groan, then applaud, because nothing makes a philosophical point stick better than attaching it to a mystery everyone already knows. The The ghost road becomes both chalkboard and sermon, a symbol that refuses to settle into one meaning. Quirky anecdotes abound. One comic poet stages a chorus of fishmongers who claim to sell invisible fish from invisible harbours along the Phantom Road. The crowd howls, enjoying the jab at political corruption thinly veiled as humour. Another satirist mocks local governors by declaring they will finally conquer the road as soon as it stops hiding a punchline that lands because every Roman has heard a similar empty promise in the Forum. The island of excuses, the road of delays, the bridge to nowhere, such barbs keep audiences laughing, even as they keep the legend alive. Even the military finds ways to bend the tale. A commander who returns from campaign without spoils blames storms near the Phantom Road, claiming divine weather thwarted his plans. Bureaucrats file it under weather manifestly divine, a phrase so pompous it borders on parody. Yet this language shields egos, protects reputations, and once again props up the story. Power and mystery make comfortable allies when both can be bent to convenience. And so, the Ghost Road weaves itself into every layer of Roman life: market banter, tavern, songs, villa mosaics, shrines, philosophy, lectures, political speeches and military excuses. Each retelling alters it slightly, polishing the surface like a coin passed too many times from hand to hand. Whether real or imagined, paved or poetic, the road thrives because it refuses to finish. Like a line of verse that never quite closes, it lingers in memory, demanding to be recited again. By the time late antiquity shadows Rome's authority, the Ghost Road has become more than stone and gravel. It is a mirror in which everyone sees what they need. Merchants see, prophet priests see, warning philosophers see metaphor, and children see adventure. Its greatest trick is not leading anywhere, but leading everywhere at once into commerce, art, religion, and the restless imagination of empire. Perhaps that is why it survives when so many actual roads crumble. It is a path that exists less in the soil than in the stories, and those stories travel farther than any legion ever could. The Ghost Road, stubborn as ivy, clings to the cultural walls of late Rome even as the empire itself begins to sag. By the 4th century, when emperors shuttle between Trier, Arles and Ravenna, the road that once promised access to the Atlantic becomes instead a riddle that everyone wants to use but no one wants to solve. It lingers in conversation, in satire, in whispered jokes and in solemn warnings. The road does not fade, it mutates, twisting into metaphors that even Romans who never set foot near Gaul can recognise. Politicians, of course, find immediate use for it. In the forums of Lutetia Paris before it was Paris, an orator waves his arms and shouts that his rival's promises are like the Phantom Road, visible only in mist and vanishing when one sets foot upon it. The audience chuckles because the comparison feels too true. Another politician answers with equal sharpness, "We will build where the road ends and make it real." It is not an answer, but it earns applause. In politics, the appearance of certainty often matters more than the thing itself. The Ghost Road therefore becomes a convenient weapon in rhetorical duels, polished and reused like a sword handed down through generations. Historians still argue whether these metaphors were born of genuine local lore, or whether speakers simply borrowed them to score easy points. Either way, the fact that audiences understood them proves how deeply the story had seeped into collective memory. Markets echo the same theme. Merchants brag that their goods travelled from beyond the road that ends nowhere, a sly way of implying distance and rarity without naming an actual place. Customers jaded yet entertained by a little more than they intended. One fishmonger swears his cousin saw wild dogs prowling the road's terminus, and to punctuate the tale, boys in the crowd bark until laughter shakes the stalls. It is a scene that feels timeless commerce blended with rumour skepticism, softened by amusement, ordinary life flavoured with just enough mystery to keep it tasty. Mystery in this case is as valuable as salt, it preserves interest when facts would spoil too quickly. Mainstream history anchors these jokes with context. Roman Gaul by this time is fully integrated into the empire's infrastructure, its roads, aqueducts and towns threaded into the fabric of Roman order. The Peutinger Table, a vast Roman map later copied in medieval times, reveals how obsessed Rome was with charting distances, routes and stops. That such a culture tolerated a road that apparently went nowhere is striking. It exposes the cracks in the marble facade even the best bureaucrats cannot pave over uncertainty. And perhaps that contrast is why the Ghost Road endured. It was proof that Rome, despite its pride in roads leading everywhere, still had one path that refused to behave. Theatres continue to mine the tale for laughter. A chorus enters, dressed as gulls, flapping awkwardly and singing about renting the Phantom Road for their summer retreat. The audience delighted by the absurdity laughs loud enough to shake the benches. Another year, a tragic heroine declares that her lover has vanished down the road that hides itself a metaphor that every broken heart in the audience instantly understands. Satire and tragedy alike feed on the image, proving again that cultural mysteries are most powerful when they wear many masks. Quirky tidbits like these spread faster than sober reports, ensuring that even people far from Gaul feel they know the road's story. At home in dim villas, the road sneaks into private rituals. A potter paints a thin, almost invisible line at the rim of a cup, a secret coastline that only sharp eyes can spot. A mother hushes her child by whispering that the phantom road is far away tonight, so no shadows will wander near the house. In another household, children play a game of drawing roads in the dust, always leaving one unfinished because that is the ghost one. These small domestic echoes may not survive in stone or parchment, but they survive in habits carried like pebbles in pockets. Religion too makes its claim. At a shrine near Massalia, priests pour libations onto the road's stones, asking Poseidon to reveal the truth, or failing that to grant safety to those who walk uncertain paths. Offerings pile up shells, coins, bits of bread-carved animals. One priest even invents a ritual of tying ribbons to a post, each ribbon representing a new rumour. When the ribbons tangle like grapevines, he announces a festival. No one knows if the gods listen, but the practice gives structure to uncertainty, and people are always hungry for that. Skeptics roll their eyes, yet they tie ribbons anyway. Better to hedge one's bets when divine moods are involved. Quirky anecdotes multiply. A chronicler in Trier claims that a group of legionaries once used the ghost road as an excuse for arriving late to garrison duty. The fog blocked our way, and the stones walked us in circles. Their commander, unimpressed, doubled their watch shifts. Another tale has it that a senator wagered his fortune on whether the road would ever reveal its true end. His descendants decades later tried to claim his winnings, only to be told by the Senate in dry humour, a road never seen cannot be declared absent. Bureaucracy, always a comedian in disguise, thus helped the road live on. Meanwhile, the road inspires caution in military minds. A general warns his troops that chasing phantom promises is like marching down the ghost road, impressive to spectators, useless in reality. Yet others find it tempting, even inspiring as a symbol of ambition. The ambiguity is the point. The road can be anything to anyone. Its power lies not in stone, but in suggestion. Historians still argue whether the road itself mattered less than the stories built around it. Was it truly a physical construction, or was it always a narrative device disguised as architecture? The lack of proof allows the debate to stretch endlessly, which might be why the road continues to fascinate. By twilight, the story grows softer, more intimate. In the forum of Rome itself, orators slip in references that make crowds murmur. And what of the phantom road? It becomes a shorthand for uncertainty, a reminder that not everything is known, measured, or taxed. Even emperors are not immune. One chronicler hints that an emperor paused at maps of Gaul and stared a little too long at the dotted line, as though wondering whether to send troops or simply let the riddle be. That hesitation itself is telling. The ghost road becomes a mirror reflecting the anxieties of an empire that senses its edges fraying. Back in the provinces, sailors carry briny gifts for storytellers, a feather with strange patterns, a seed shaped like no local plant, a pebble too black for the region. Do these prove anything? Not really, but they feed the tale. A boatswain claims he smelled pine resin far at sea. His captain insists it was only tar, but the crew votes for pine, because pine makes a better story. The road's reputation swells with such fragments, details too quirky to dismiss, too fragile to verify. They are the embroidery that hides whether there was ever a brick underneath. And so the ghost road thrives not because it leads anywhere, but because it leads everywhere into politics, philosophy, religion, commerce, theatre, and bedtime stories. Its stones, whether real or imagined, become stepping stones for imagination itself. The road lingers because it is useful. Rome does not need it to be real. It needs it to be meaningful. In that need, the road proves indestructible. By the time the ghost road has become less a path through Gaul than a path through Roman thought, it is satire, metaphor, scapegoat, and sacred sign all at once. Like the island of excuses or the bridge to nowhere, it survives precisely because it refuses to finish. In that refusal it holds power enough to haunt an empire long after its stones, if they ever existed, have crumbled. The ghost road by the late centuries of Rome no longer belongs to builders or soldiers, it belongs to memory. Its stones, whether they were ever laid or not, have become the spine of stories that outlast emperors, temples and laws. By the time barbarian migrations push against the Empire's frontiers, the road has grown too large to erase, too useful to discard, too flexible to die. It has slipped beyond geography and into myth, and once a story achieves that escape velocity, it orbits forever. Imagine the scribes of Byzantium hunched in lamplight, copying old Roman itineraries. Their quills scratch with confidence when tracing known roads and rivers, but when they arrive at the phantom one, their strokes falter. A faint line, a dotted curve, a caption reading reported once. They sigh, yet they leave it in. To omit it would be cowardice, as though they feared a road might rise from the mist to scold them. The fact that copyists carried the line forward proves how powerfully habit sustains mystery. Historians still argue whether such persistence was driven by superstition, laziness, or a sly awareness that people crave ambiguity. Perhaps like the road itself, the answer remains unfinished. At the same time, oral tradition does its steady work. In taverns of Ravenna, sailors insist they heard barking dogs across a foggy gulf. In the streets of Rome, children play games where one chalk line runs to the edge of the courtyard and then stops because that is the ghost road. Grandfathers lean on canes and tell stories of cousins who nearly found its end. These tales stretch like dough, rising with each retelling until the bread is mostly air, and yet bread filled with air still feeds. The road's nourishment is not in proof, but in persistence. Mainstream fact provides the anchor for these drifting images. Roman road building was extraordinary, thousands of kilometres, thousands of miles stitched together the empire from Britain to Mesopotamia. Stone slabs, mile markers and drainage ditches endure even today. That such an empire could tolerate a road that ended nowhere is baffling, almost insulting to Roman pride. But perhaps that is exactly why it lasted. The ghost road reminded everyone from senator to slave that Rome's mastery was not total. A single loose thread can make a whole garment seem fragile, and that fragility is both terrifying and strangely comforting. It is a relief to know that even Rome could not explain everything. Quirky tidbits add flavour. One late chronicler claims a senator once offered a bounty for any man who could prove where the road led. A poor farmer presented him with a cartload of rocks, insisting he had gathered them from the road's terminus. The senator laughed, paid him anyway, and used the stones to line his garden. Whether this happened or not hardly matters. The tale survives because it makes the senator seem both foolish and generous, which are two of Rome's favourite qualities in its leaders. Another story insists that a band of monks used the ghost road as a metaphor in sermons, "Follow not the way that ends in nothing." Their congregation, however, enjoyed the story so much that it lost its sting, and became a parable of divine playfulness. The ghost road, it seems, could not be trapped even in morality. It always wriggled into humour. As the empire cracks, metaphors deepen. Politicians compare fading authority to the road's vanishing line present on maps absent on the ground. Philosophers argue whether the road proves that perception creates reality, or whether reality hides behind perception. Poets turn it into a metaphor for longing itself, a path that always promises but never delivers. Even defeated generals use it as camouflage. Our legions marched to the ghost road and were delayed. Bureaucrats nod gravely, scribble the excuse and move on. Paperwork, after all, prefers a neat explanation even if it is nonsense, and in this way the road survives in documents even as the empire burns. By now the ghost road has shed its need for stones. It exists in the imagination alone. It is the laugh of a tavern, the groan of a soldier, the sigh of a scribe, the whisper of a parent, the wink of a poet. It has become an inheritance passed like a family heirloom, valuable not for its substance but for its suggestion. Historians still argue whether a volcanic cone once stood at the road's end, or whether cloud banks tricked tired eyes, or whether bureaucrats simply inked a line to fill a gap. The lack of consensus is the point. The road thrives because it refuses to be settled. It is a riddle with no answer, and riddles without answers endure longer than empires. In a sense, the ghost road outlasts Rome itself. As barbarians press into Gaul and the Western Empire phrase, the story continues. Pilgrims heading west whisper about it. Medieval monks copying manuscripts replicate its faint outline. Troubadours spin it into metaphors for lost love and unreachable paradise. By then the original stones, if they ever existed, are gone, swallowed by forest river or nothing at all. But absence never stopped a story. In fact, absence is often the story's best friend. The less that is known, the more the mind fills in, and so the ghost road becomes immortal, a rumour without expiration. By the time lamps gutter out in Roman streets and sandals echo across stone alleys, someone somewhere is still glancing west, still wondering if the road leads to riches' ruin or merely itself. That act of wondering is the road's true endpoint. It leads not to geography, but to imagination, not to empire, but to humanity. For as long as people crave mystery, the ghost road will not crumble. It is unfinished, and unfinished things are the hardest to forget. And now let the story soften the way twilight settles gently across old stone and silent hills. The ghost road, after so many twists of rumour and retellings, takes a step backward. Not with anger, not with denial, but with the quiet grace of something that knows when to rest. It withdraws from pavement into parchment, from parchment into memory, from memory into the soft hush of imagination. Picture the sea calm in your mind, waves smoothing themselves into silver ribbons. Roads that once stretched toward horizons now curl like sleeping serpents, their ends hidden in the folds of night. Lamps in distant villas gutter low one by one, leaving only the glow of embers. Even the restless tavern voices have thinned to murmurs like tide water ebbing into silence. The world exhales long and slow. Breathe with it. Inhale as the tide gathers, exhale as it drifts away. Each thought is a small boat sliding out across still water. You do not need to chase it. You only need to let it drift. If an old question rises, if a doubt or curiosity stirs, let it float past like a cloud moving across the horizon. The mystery does not demand answers tonight. Somewhere in that hush, a map rolls itself closed. Somewhere a scribe rests his quill, a soldier unlaces his sandals, a mother hums a lullaby. Somewhere a captain older now remembers chasing shadows and smiles at the thought that not every road needs to arrive anywhere. Above them all, the stars wait patient and unblinking guardians of quiet hours. Close your eyes now and let that patience be yours. The ghost road will keep your secrets. It asks nothing but rest, and tonight that is more than enough.